What is up? GoodMicWork back at you with a special episode in the spirit of SummerSlam. I figured I would come up and give you guys some sort of a special video reliving some of my favorite moments in SummerSlam history, and what better way to do that than in a top 10. A lot of you probably weren't expecting this video. I know in recent commentaries I've been mentioning and promising a brand new DVD review coming up in the future as well as a Q&A, but I also mentioned that in the next several months you're going to see some changes to this channel, including possibly a few new channel segments. And this is a little preview of what one of those segments will be. I know it's not very original. A lot of other YouTube channels out there do top 10s and top 5s and top 8s and top 7s, so it's not the most original idea in the world, but still I think it's an idea that fans are going to enjoy watching for me. One of my goals in the future for this channel with a lot of my channel segments is to make videos that are watchable for long periods of time, because right now I come up a lot during the week and do Raw reviews and SmackDown reviews and react to pay-per-views and things like that, and I will continue to do that. However, they don't have a whole lot of value in the future as far as watchability goes, maybe a year or two after the fact. Who wants to hear me talk about a random Raw in the third week of October in 2015? Nobody cares. So with segments like my DVD reviews and Q&As and This Day in Histories and now these top 10s and even my WrestleMania Memories video and stuff like that, those videos can be watched years down the line, and that's the whole point, is to keep the views and the interest and the exposure and the subs coming. This video I decided, because SummerSlam is the second biggest pay-per-view of the year, that I wanted to come up and give you something SummerSlam related. I've done this before. About 3 years ago, I believe, I did a top 5 SummerSlams, and then 2 years ago, I did my SummerSlam Memories video, which inspired my WrestleMania Memories video, which has probably been my best commentary to date. The links to all these videos, by the way, are in the description below. Please like this video. If you enjoy it, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitter at GoodMicWork, like my Facebook page, visit my website, GoodMicWorkCommentaries.com. You can also listen to this episode over there and download an MP3, or you can find me on iTunes or Stitcher Radio. As far as the subject we're going to get into tonight, it is going to be my, GoodMicWork's, top 10 favorite SummerSlam matches of all time. Now, I know a lot of other YouTubers do top 10 videos. Mine are going to be more commentary form because I feel that's what my identity is. I'm more of a talker, a discusser, a podcaster type of thing. So I'm not going to give you a top 10 video that's 4 minutes long, that's brilliantly edited with video and pictures and jokes and all that, like a website like What Culture might do. Mine are going to be more my style, and that is I'm going to discuss these matches and talk about my personal memories of them and why they are my favorite matches of all time. And that's the biggest thing I want everybody to remember while listening to this commentary. These are GoodMicWork's favorite SummerSlam matches. This is not the top 10 greatest or what I feel the greatest matches should be. These are my personal favorites from SummerSlam. A lot of people have trouble distinguishing that, so if you have a problem with any of these matches I'm about to mention, you are welcome to start a YouTube channel and go up and make your own top 10 favorite SummerSlam matches, but these 10 happen to be mine. Now that all that bullshit is out of the way, let's get right into the countdown here and start with number 10. I would love to put this match even higher up on my countdown, but I'm going to leave it at number 10, and that is SummerSlam 1990, the Hart Foundation versus Demolition for the WWE Tag Team titles. This was one of my favorite SummerSlam matches ever, and I mention this a lot when I talk about my favorite moments in wrestling, is because I remember exactly where I was at the time. This pay-per-view took place the night before school started for me, and I stayed up late to watch SummerSlam that year, and there were so many good matches on that card. I really enjoyed the cage match between the Ultimate Warrior and Ravishing Rick Rude. The crowd and the atmosphere and the energy in the Philadelphia Spectrum that night was amazing. It was just a hot, balmy summer night, and the Philadelphia Spectrum was a little bit of a smaller building. I mean, it might have held 18,000, 20,000 at the most, but it was definitely a little bit smaller of an arena, so it felt a little bit more intimate. The fans seemed packed around that ring. It was sold out to the rafters, and there were so many matches on that card that got great crowd reactions. We had an Intercontinental title change that night with Mr. Perfect dropping the belt to Kerry Von Erich, but my favorite match on the entire pay-per-view was this one, Hart Foundation versus Demolition, 2 out of 3 falls for the WWE Tag Team title. I have discussed this match many times over the years in my commentary, so a lot of you already know what this match means to me. Demolition had just won their third tag team title by defeating the Colossal Connection, Andre the Giant and Haku, at WrestleMania 6, one of my favorite WrestleMania matches of all time, and they were such a huge babyface team. Demolition is one of my favorite teams of all time in the WWE. Even though they initially came in to be Vince's answer to the Road Warriors, they developed their own legacy and they paved their own road, and I think they are way overdue for a Hall of Fame induction, and hopefully that will come in the very near future. Minnesota will be hosting a WrestleMania, I think, in a year or two, so hopefully that can be the place where they go in, if not this coming up year. They turned heel right out of the blue, too, going into this pay-per-view. Bill Eadie, Axe, I guess, had some issues, and he had to step away from the WWE, so I guess they were weaning him off, and that's when they brought in Crush, Bryan Adams, to be the third man on the team. And they were basically a three-man unit, and without any warning, when they introduced Crush and they were interviewed about it, I remember Smash just started healing on the crowd, and they just basically turned heel overnight, no explanation, no nothing, no storyline to set it up. They were just heels now. Now, there were stipulations all over the place, and the biggest one was that there can only be 2 members of Demolition at ringside, so they can't have a guy on the outside of the ring, none of that stuff. It can only be 2 of them, but they didn't have to announce which 2 until the match started. So as expected, it did turn out to be Smash and Crush taking on Brett and Jim, tag team title, 2 out of 3 falls. Now, this match was so full of drama and excitement. The crowd was into it. Demolition even took the first fall by pinning Bret Hart with their finisher, which was kind of cool, and then the Hart Foundation came storming back. Demolition got disqualified in the second fall when Bret had Smash pinned, and then Crush just basically tackled the referee to stop him, and I think it was Earl Hebner just called for the bell and disqualified Demolition, evening the match at 1 fall apiece. And now going into the third fall, you could smell it, you knew Demolition was ripe, but the way it was all pulled off, and the finish was one of my favorite things of all time, because everybody played a role in this thing. The wrestlers had to be organized and know what was going on. Vince McMahon and Roddy Piper, who did commentary that night, did a brilliant job of acting like they could not tell what the hell was going on. The Road Warriors came out there. The fans were going nuts. It was a mess. So basically, because there is only 2 members of Demolition allowed at ringside, Axe pulls a fast one and runs down there when the referee's not looking and gets under the ring. And he winds up switching places with Smash during the match. And he's fresh as a daisy, and he's in there beating the hell out of Bret Hart. Axe and Smash do the switcheroo a couple of times before finally that prompts the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, who had finally come into the WWE. They had just gotten there. They hit the ring to figure everything out. They pull out Smash or Axe from underneath the ring. They knock Crush off the top rope, who's about to nail Bret Hart with the Demolition finisher. Referee doesn't know what's going on. The commentators are going apeshit, and Bret Hart just kind of sneakily crawls up behind Crush, and Jim Neidhart slingshots himself over the top rope into a shoulder tackle on Crush. Bret Hart schoolboys him over. Referee finally turns around and counts the 1, 2, 3, and the fucking roof came off of that place. It was just such a well put together match with all sorts of shenanigans and chicanery, and it was pulled off to perfection. Everybody did their part, including the announcers, the referee, Hawk, Animal, Axe, Smash, Crush, Jim, Brett. Everybody did a fantastic job. One of my favorite WWE tag team title changes in history, if not my favorite one. If you have the opportunity, go on the network and check it out. You will not be disappointed. It's had some really nice touches at the end. You had a great post-match interview later on in the show with the Legion of Doom and the Hart Foundation and Mean Gene. Jim Neidhart was absolutely hysterical in that, and then at the end of the match, after the 3 count, when Neidhart jumps on top of Brett, who had been beaten up the entire match to kind of protect him, he starts looking at the camera and doing that awesome laugh that he does, because even though he's concerned for Brett, who's obviously injured, he's thrilled because they just won back the WWE Tag Team titles for the 2nd time. And I remember marking the fuck out in my living room, because even back in those days, I was still a huge Bret Hart fan. I became a fan of Bret Hart way before he even won the Intercontinental title. I liked him as a heel in the Hart Foundation. I loved to watch him work. There was just something about him that I was drawn to, that I really liked. I just appreciated what he did in the ring, and I never in my wildest imagination would have thought that Bret Hart would ever be a singles champion, Intercontinental champion, much less WWE champion and Hall of Famer and legend and icon that he became. I never saw that coming when I was a fan of his back in the 80s and 90s. And the Hitman will be a very significant part of this commentary. Number 9, a match that I witnessed live in Raleigh, North Carolina, SummerSlam 2000. TLC match for the WWE Tag Team titles, the Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudley Boys. I had to put this match on the countdown because I remember how the match made me feel to witness it live. I was very close to the ring. at SummerSlam that year. Of course, as most of you know, I've talked about it over the years. I did used to live in North Carolina on the beach for many, many, many years, and anytime the WWE would come to North Carolina or the Southeast in general, me and my buddies would always hop in a car and go to the shows. If you want to hear all of my wrestler interactions from back in the Attitude Era, check out my latest Q&A. You can find it on my YouTube channel. You'll hear all sorts of stories about some of those guys, including some of the guys in this match. WWE hadn't gone too crazy with the tables and the chairs and the violence yet, although we did see Mick Foley, Peter Pan off the Hell in the Cell 2 years before this. But a lot of things that we saw in this match I had not quite seen yet. I mean, the Hardys and Edge and Christian got on the map the year before. I think it was at No Mercy, whatever the October pay-per-view was, where they were battling in a ladder match for the services of Terry Runnels. That match right there really got those two teams on the map. And then when you add the Dudley Boys in the mix when they came over from ECW, the tag team scene was on fire again, and it was so awesome. And this match was so crazy to witness live and to see some of these bumps up close and personal. And I'll talk a little bit about the match in a second, but another reason why I liked it is because I remember how good I felt at the time that the tag team scene was being reborn in the WWE. There was not much of a tag team division in recent years in the WWE. So to see these three teams all being major contenders, along with a few other of the great tag teams they had, I was thrilled because I've always been a gigantic fan of tag team wrestling and tag team psychology. I mean, hell, I just talked about Bret Hart. I became a fan of his watching him in tag team wrestling. If I was ever a wrestler, I always envisioned myself in a tag team because I like the tag team style. I like the psychology of tag teams. I like what it takes to actually have a good team, you know, the contrasting styles, how you structure your matches, who does all the selling and why, who gets the hot tag and why, cutting the ring in half, fast tagging on body parts, all that kind of shit I love about tag team wrestling, and I missed it, especially in the 80s. I was a huge fan of the Can-Ams, the Hearts, the Bulldogs, Demolition, the Road Warriors, a lot of teams like that. So to see the tag team division becoming about as big as it had ever been within the last 15 years around this time, I was thrilled to see. And then when you look at this match and how fucking crazy it was, they got really innovative here because now you've got everything involved. You got tables, you got ladders, you got chairs. It's all legal. It's not just a ladder match. It's not just a table match. It's everything. The Hardy Boys, too, were basically in their hometown. Raleigh is not far away at all from Cameron, where they grew up. And they had a lot of friends in the crowd that night. And I remember back in the day in the 90s when the Hardys were jobbers in the WWE and they first started getting rolling, they used to have a whole group of people. They used to have a whole crew of like groupies, these sluttily dressed, kind of ugly to be honest, girls, a lot of them overweight, all coming down to see the Hardy Boys wrestle. And me and my buddy used to always laugh because we would see them all over the place, in the arenas, at the bar, at the hotel, all the shit. And we just used to laugh at how busted the Hardy Boys crew used to look. But as brutal as this match was, the chair shots and the bumps that were taken, there were three spots that really stand out in this match. Number one was a back table bump that Matt Hardy took from inside of the ring, standing backwards on the ladder, and he fell backwards outside of the ring and landed through two tables. He landed on the same side of the ring that I was seated on, and I was only about 4 rows back. And this was one of my first times of witnessing up close table bumps and shit like that. I had been to countless amounts of wrestling shows, but I had never seen anybody crash through a table that close up before. And when I heard Matt Hardy's body hit the ground, hit the pavement on the outside of the ring, the ground fucking shook. I felt it under my feet. I mean, that's how hard the vibration was. And I was like, damn, these guys absolutely kill themselves in there, which I already knew they did, but just to see it firsthand like that, not seeing anything like that before, was pretty awesome. So my memories of this match and how in awe of it I was, there was no way I was going to be able to leave it off of this countdown. Jeff Hardy also took a crazy bump as well. He stood completely on top of the ladder on the outside of the ring and tried to swanton on top of Bubba. Of course, he moved, and Jeff crashes through a couple of tables as well. And then in typical Edge and Christian fashion, they won this match as well. And near the finish, too, was the other big spot that I can remember, and that's when Devon was hanging from the apparatus that holds the belts up. And I remember when he fell, when they took the ladder out from underneath him and he fell down, the angle that I was seated at when I was watching him, it looked like he fell directly on his head. And I remember me and my buddy and everybody in the section around us were screaming, "Holy shit, Devon just died." But really all it was is he just kind of fell awkward, kind of landed on his shoulder, and when you watch it back on TV, it doesn't look as different. But when I saw it live, I literally thought Devon had been killed. And then, of course, in my favorite part of the match, Edge and Christian climb up to retrieve the tag team titles, and it was so great because back then the fans used to get so mad because if you go back and watch these TLC matches, all of them that these three teams had together, Edge and Christian always took the least amount of bumps. They never did anything crazy, and they never went through 10 tables. It was always the Hardys mostly and sometimes the Dudleys doing these bumps, Edge and Christian generally came out of these things unscathed. They did a few good things. I mean, they would take some regular bumps. I think even in this match, Christian took like the Bubba Bomb or whatever from the ladder, and I remember being scared watching that. I'm like, Jesus, that is a dangerous bump to take. But Edge and Christian, other than a few small table bumps, they never did anything really insane. Edge never got really hardcore until later on in his career when he fought Mick Foley at WrestleMania 22. But in this match, Edge and Christian generally took the least amount of bumps of all the teams, and they would always wind up winning. And that's what I thought was so funny. The fans used to hate it. They used to get so mad. They used to call Edge and Christian pussies, and they would be pissed at the WWE for making the Dudleys and the Hardys do all the work and then have Edge and Christian grab the belts. But to me, that was the beauty of it. That was the beauty of them being heels. You talk about getting heat. That got them even more with the smart audience and stuff like that. And I'm not discrediting any of the punishment that Edge and Christian took, but when you go back and watch that match, it's clear that they did not brutalize themselves and their bodies nearly as much as the other two teams did. But this match was fun, it was high-paced, it was high energy, the atmosphere and the reaction from the crowd that night was so fun to be a part of, and I'll never forget it, and I love this SummerSlam mainly for that reason. I mean, later on, this was the same show that Steve Blackman took a giant bump off the stage or off the set when he was having that hardcore match with Shane McMahon. But to me, that was really more of a glorified stunt. This match, these guys were legitimately killing themselves, and I was very appreciative, and I always loved these days, the rivalry between these three teams and that long set of TLC matches and ladder matches that they all had together is something that I'll never forget. So this match is definitely one of my favorite in SummerSlam history. Number 8, Kurt Angle versus Rey Mysterio from SummerSlam 2002. This pay-per-view came really close to having 3 matches on my top 10, but I felt that was too many, so I had to bump one and stick it in the honorable mentions. And by the way, I will go through all of the honorable mentions before I get to number 1, so stay tuned for that. But I always enjoyed this match. It's just a random match. It actually opened the show at SummerSlam this year. So I think that's another reason why I liked it so much, because I'm a huge fan of Ray, and I'm a huge fan of Kurt Angle, especially back then. And the crowd was so hot because the show had just started, and you're starting off with an amazing match between two Hall of Famers, and everything was so perfect and so crisp, and the bumps were perfect. Everything was working out extremely well. There was literally no botches at all in this match, even the beginning, when Kurt Angle's in the ring waiting for Ray, and his music hits, and he's not coming down the aisle, and then he's on the outside of the ring standing behind Kurt Angle, and he jumps off and hits him with a head scissors, takedown, and all of that. Everything in this match was so fun to watch. When you go back and see the type of shape that these guys were in and the things that they were capable of doing back in 2002, I can watch this match over and over and over and over. It might not be on everybody's top 10, but it's on mine just because it's a personal favorite of mine. I really don't have a very good reason why. I've just always enjoyed watching this match, probably more than almost all the matches on this pay-per-view, and this was a pretty fun SummerSlam to watch. 2002 was definitely probably in my top 5 or top 10 SummerSlams of all time. Kurt Angle ended up getting the victory, making Rey Mysterio tap out to the ankle lock in an amazing back-and-forth match, and Rey Mysterio came extremely close to beating Kurt Angle a couple of times. One time, I thought there was a for sure 3 count when he hit him with the West Coast pop, and Kurt Angle kicked out at the last minute, and it was just an amazing match. So again, if you got the WWE Network or you have this thing on DVD, go back and take another look at that match. You won't be disappointed. Number 7, another match that might not be on everybody's top 10, but it's on mine because I just have fond memories of it, and that is Razor Ramon versus Diesel for the Intercontinental title at SummerSlam 1994. Diesel had been in the WWE for about a year as Shawn Michaels' bodyguard. Razor and Shawn had that great, unbelievable, amazing, legendary ladder match at WrestleMania 10 where Razor walked away as the undisputed Intercontinental Champion. They then put Diesel in front of him as a challenger, and Diesel actually beat Razor for the title on television, on Superstars or Challenge or something like that. And it was rare to see an Intercontinental title change back in those days, just on one of their regular weekly TV shows in syndication or whatever. So Diesel was being built as a pretty unstoppable machine. He was now Intercontinental Champion, and him and Shawn had basically reversed roles. Shawn was now on the outside of the ring accompanying Diesel to the ring during every match, and Diesel was doing all the work in the ring. So Razor Ramon would get his rematch at SummerSlam against Diesel, and since Shawn Michaels was in Diesel's corner, Razor Ramon got to even up the odds by having the legendary, probably the greatest running back in the history of the NFL and hometown boy Walter Payton be in his corner for this Intercontinental Intercontinental title match. This show was in Chicago at the United Center. This was the very first show ever held in the United Center, and I don't think the WWE has ever been back there. But it's a beautiful looking arena, and I was so happy WWE was there back in 1994 because wrestling was in the shitter, the houses were down, attendance was down, interest was down. So to see them pack out this giant building in Chicago was really nice for me to see as a fan that, okay, not everybody hates wrestling. They still do have a lot of fans out there, and they packed in that United Center and presented the fans with a hell of a card. And this was one of the nice gems on that card, Intercontinental title rematch with Razor and Diesel. Now, the night before this pay-per-view, they put the belts, the tag team belts, on Shawn and Diesel. They took on the Head Shrinkers the night before at a house show and defeated them for the tag team titles, so Diesel entered this pay-per-view with 2 titles. He had only been in the WWE for a year, and he's a very decorated champion by this point. So I think putting the tag team belts on Shawn and Diesel was done because they were going to take the IC belt and put it back on Razor, and they wanted to keep Diesel strong and relevant. So the match in the ring wasn't, I would say, like a 5-star match or anything like that because Kevin Nash is extremely limited, but these two guys still told an awesome story. All the extracurricular stuff on the outside of the ring with Walter Payton and Shawn Michaels was really fun to watch. The crowd was into it. The atmosphere was awesome. I remember watching this match live on pay-per-view at home. Jerry Lawler and Vince McMahon were doing a great job on commentary. It just had a really good overall feel, and I look back on this match very, very fondly. And I myself really loved Razor Ramon as the Intercontinental Champion. I remember being a little bit disappointed when he dropped the belt to Diesel. So I was extremely happy when the finish came and Razor Ramon was able to knock off Diesel and win back the Intercontinental title with help from Shawn Michaels. Of course, Shawn Michaels tries to get involved again. You knew at some point him and Walter Payton were going to get physical. Shawn tries to climb in the ring, and Walter Payton is trying to slow him down. Finally, Shawn gets in there while the referee is knocked out, and Diesel holds up Razor for Shawn to deliver the super kick, but Razor moves, and Shawn nails Diesel. Walter Payton then grabs Shawn Michaels, preventing him from stopping the 3 count, and Razor Ramon wins back the Intercontinental title to an enormous pop by the crowd. And this really kicked off the dissension between Shawn and Diesel that would roll on all the way until Survivor Series. They would hold on to these tag team titles. Actually, they would never lose the tag team titles. When they finally did break up a few months later, Shawn threw the belt in the trash, and they just vacated them. So WWE at this point at SummerSlam had already had in their head that eventually they're going to have a showdown and a split between Shawn Michaels and Diesel, and this was the beginning of all of that when Shawn basically cost Diesel the Intercontinental title. And then the end of the match when Walter Payton is celebrating with Razor Ramon, I think they even brought in Walter Payton's son to celebrate with them. And it was just a great moment not only for WWE fans, but for Intercontinental Champion fans, and for Razor Ramon fans, and for Walter Payton fans in the city of Chicago. A great overall moment and a match that stands out to me as one of my favorite in SummerSlam history, and that's why it's on this list. The Intercontinental title has a giant presence in this commentary, and number 6 is another match for the Intercontinental title, another ladder match between The Rock and Triple H at SummerSlam 1998. I was a huge fan not only of this pay-per-view, but of this match in general. I mean, Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon had reinvented what the ladder match was. And now you had 2 brand new rivals that had just kick-started their lifelong feud and rivalry and competition between each other. The Rock and Triple H, both the leaders of their respective factions, the Nation and DX. The Rock, of course, was the Intercontinental Champion and had been for quite some time. He was taking on Triple H, the challenger, who's a babyface now. DX had just turned babyface a few months before this, right after WrestleMania, when Shawn dropped the belt to Austin. And what I liked about this match the most is that they didn't have to do anything too crazy. It was more of a ground-based ladder match. It was more of what a ladder match probably was when it was first invented. This match was a little bit more elaborate than that, but it wasn't over the top like Shawn and Razor's would be, or like some of the matches we would see from the Hardys and Edge and Christian and the Dudleys a couple of years later. This match was brutal. It was hard-hitting. Instead of diving off of ladders through tables or diving off of ladders onto the ring floor, they were slamming each other on the ladder. They were hitting each other with the ladder. The Rock got his nose busted open. I just like the psychology of this ladder match very, very much, and despite the fact that there wasn't any big-time spots or bumps, it is still up there with one of my favorite ladder matches of all time, because these two guys proved that you don't need all that shit to tell a good story if you know what you're doing, and The Rock and Triple H earned my respect, both of them, that night. And I said, wow, these two guys, I mean, The Rock had only been in the business for 2 years at this point, and he was already an extreme pro. He knew what he was doing in there. He knew how to work, he knew how to have good matches, and he had good chemistry with a lot of people in the WWE, and Triple H was one of the better ones that he had that chemistry with. and their rivalry would span the Intercontinental title and the WWE World title. So they have a long and storied history together, and the finish saw a lot of shenanigans going on. Mark Henry was out there trying to help The Rock, and of course Chyna is in Triple H's corner. She ends up entering the ring and nutshotting The Rock, who's about to pull down the Intercontinental title. He falls off, and Triple H is able to reach up and grab the belt to a huge pop. I was so happy. The Rock was ripe. He had been Intercontinental Champion for a while. I think at the time, looking back, I remember my personal feelings is that I was more of a fan of Triple H at this time than I was of The Rock. I knew The Rock was awesome. I knew he could talk. I knew he had a ton of charisma, and he was definitely one of my favorites, but I remember being happy that Triple H won. I remember rooting for Triple H. I think as happy as I was to see The Rock getting over with the crowd, I was even more happy to see Triple H getting over with the crowd, because I was never a huge fan of the blue blood snob gimmick that he did before. And even in his early days of DX, when he started getting away from that, Shawn was still doing the majority of the talking, and he was still the focal point and the star of the show. So to see Triple H get that opportunity and be successful and be over and run DX and lead DX just as well, if not better, than Shawn Michaels did, I was so happy that he won the Intercontinental title. And unfortunately, if a lot of you remember, he never even got a chance to really defend it or get his Intercontinental title run off the ground because he had an injured knee that I guess had required surgery, and they had to take the belt off of him and have a tournament for it like the next month. So maybe in hindsight, looking back, they should have put The Rock over in this because Triple H's injury was going to keep him out of action. I think he even worked this ladder match with an injured knee, and he didn't have the surgery on it till later, until he injured it some more or just decided that it needed to be worked on. So my hat's off to both of those guys for an awesome ladder match. It's one that I'll never forget, and if you've never seen it, take a look at it. We'll travel back now to the pay-per-view that we were just at a minute ago, SummerSlam 1994, to talk about number 5 on my countdown, and that is Bret Hart versus Owen Hart for the WWE title, SummerSlam 1994, inside of a steel cage. I have talked about this rivalry, and particularly this match, many, many times in the past, so I'm not going to elaborate too much on it right here, but there was so much surrounding this match because Owen Hart, of course, at WrestleMania 10, just a couple of months before this, was able to beat Bret Hart in the opening match in probably my favorite 1 or 2 WrestleMania matches of all time. And then later on that night, Bret Hart went on to defeat Yokozuna and win the WWE title. So Owen now was naturally the number 1 contender. He had the whole family thing involved, and it was a lot of family drama. A lot of Hart family members were a part of this storyline. Stu and Helen, Bruce Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, Davey Boy Smith, who had just made his return to WWE. He had been off in WCW for a couple of years, and he returned at this show. He was sitting in the front row with Diana to watch Bret and Owen beat the shit out of each other, and they interviewed him at ringside, and you knew some shit was going to go down. And what I liked about this steel cage match is that it was different because steel cage matches are usually used for blow-offs or to take 2 guys that legitimately want to kill each other and you put them inside of a cage and you let them fight to the death. There's usually a ton of blood, there's usually brutality, and all of that shit. For the first time ever, the cage had a different purpose, and that was, at least in storyline, was to keep the Hart family out of the ring. There was a lot of Hart family members at ringside, like I said, Bruce and Keith and Davey Boy and Jim Neidhart, and everybody was there. The cage was designed to let the brothers hash out their differences. So instead of 2 guys killing each other and trying to mash up and bloody each other's faces, these 2 guys spent most of the match trying to escape the cage, trying to win, because the WWE title was on the line here. There was a lot more at stake than just pride. There's also a belt on the line. So I like the fact that the WWE took their blood ban and all of the silly little childish rules they had back in the day, all these things they couldn't do. I mean, hell, even like a year later, Shawn and Razor had a ladder match at SummerSlam, and they couldn't even use the ladder as a weapon because of all the rules that they had to follow. So the fact that they were able to make this match still good, but not have a typical bloody, brutal cage match, I thought was really well done, and Bret Hart and Owen Hart pulled off and performed in one of the best cage matches I've ever seen. They were still able to wrestle and to showcase their moves and to do their thing, and then you just added Owen Hart trying to scurry out of the cage every chance he got. It made for a lot of drama. It made for a lot of tense moments. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time because I was a big Bret Hart mark, as all of you know. I didn't want to see him drop the belt, so I was really hoping he would win, and every time Owen would be so close to the floor, I would start having a panic attack, and the whole match was just really, really well done, and I loved it. My only complaint is that it was not the main event. Unfortunately, this year, the main event went to The Undertaker versus The Undertaker, which is ludicrous. I definitely think Brett and Owen should have closed this show, but they didn't, and there's nothing we can do about that. But the match itself did not disappoint. It was full of everything, full of drama, finally ended with Owen Hart being hung up on the outside of the ring, dangling there, and Brett's able to jump down and win the match, but it didn't end there. Jim Neidhart then scales the barricade and starts attacking Bret Hart, and him and Owen get Bret inside of the ring and start beating the shit out of him. They even lock the cage door so none of the other Hart family members or the brothers can get in there. Everybody was there. I think Ross and Wayne and all of the fucking brothers were there. A bunch of them were. And Davey Boy had been taken out by Jim right before he started attacking Bret Hart, so finally Davey comes to, takes his shirt off, and he starts climbing up the cage, and the crowd starts popping. He hops in the ring to save Bret Hart. Owen and Jim scurry away, and it definitely didn't even come close to ending the rivalry between these two brothers. If anything, it intensified it, because Jim Neidhart had just come back like the month before at the King of the Ring, and now Davey is back, so now you got a whole family feud here with all sorts of brother and brother-in-laws and wives and sisters, and everybody is getting involved in this thing, and it was awesome. And I love these days, and I love this rivalry, and I loved anything that the Hart family ever did on TV. But what I liked the most about this cage match was that these two guys were able to pull off a good cage match despite the fact that they had limitations put on them, much like Shawn and Razor would do the following year in the ladder match. When it comes to professional wrestlers, especially back in the 90s, it's hard to think of two guys that might have been better in the ring than Bret and Owen. I mean, just a couple of guys maybe. Shawn you could put on that list, I'm sure, but when you think about how they pulled that cage match off, fucking brilliant. Speaking of our old pal, HBK, he finally appears on this list at number 4. Shawn Michaels versus Triple H, SummerSlam 2002. This match makes my countdown because I was so happy to see Shawn back. I thought he was the greatest professional wrestler that had ever fucking lived. I mean, Bret Hart was my favorite, but Shawn was clearly the one that I felt was the best. When Kevin Nash calls him the Michael Jordan, he's right. That's exactly what Shawn Michaels was in the 90s. And when he had to leave for 4.5 years, I couldn't believe that we had lost Shawn. And at this point, I didn't think he'd ever come back. And plus, he was not in a good place in his life. We all have heard the stories of what an asshole Shawn Michaels was, especially back in the 90s during his WWE title runs. And then even after he left the WWE, he still wasn't doing well. He still had an addiction problem, and he was all pilled up all of the time. He wasn't very nice to people. He was kind of a jerk-off, cocky, arrogant asshole. And finally, he snaps out of it. He married Nitro Girl Whisper, and he had a kid, and, he's told the story several times in interviews and in his book, and I think it was one day he was passed out, just completely drugged out of his mind, passed out on the couch with his kid laying on him, and I think his wife gave him some shit, and it kind of snapped him out of it, and he woke up, and he got himself clean. A lot of people question his motives, if he's really sincere with his religious stuff. I don't know. I don't care. I don't give a shit what the fuck Shawn Michaels believes in, as long as he is a better person. And Shawn had this awakening, and he got himself clean, he got himself back in shape, he got himself trusted again by probably not only his wife, but the WWE, and they started talking, because Shawn, I think, had been outright let go. You know, after he had left and retired from the ring, he came back as commissioner, and he had some special guest referee spots and things like that, but eventually they just let him go because he was out of his mind. So he was able to come back in. They did the angle with him and Triple H where they reformed DX. Shawn even briefly came back as a new member of the NWO during the summer. And then they did the thing where Triple H attacks Shawn Michaels in the parking garage and throws his head through a car window. And nobody knew that Triple H did it until like a week or two later when it was revealed that Triple H was the one, and he turns heel right there in front of the world, which prompts Shawn Michaels to challenge him to a street fight at SummerSlam. And the match was accepted and made, and it was supposed to be a one-time deal. But when Shawn came out there and his music hit and that crowd went nuts, and then he got in that ring and wrestled as if he never fucking left. This guy was gone 4 years and 4 months, and he comes back and gets in the ring as if he wrestled yesterday. He even looked pretty good. He was back in shape. I mean, if you remember maybe a year or two before this, what was the match with, it was the one that he refereed with Triple H and The Rock. It was the Iron Man match at the Judgment Day, or whatever, the one where Undertaker returned as the biker or whatever. If you go back and watch that match and watch Shawn Michaels and look at him in his referee outfit, he is not in good shape. He looked like he hadn't been in the gym in years, and here it is 2 years later, and he's got himself back in ring shape, and he performs in one of the best matches ever. He was, hell, they were coming off top ropes onto tables. He had Triple H laid out there on the outside of the ring, and he climbs up to the top rope, and I love that spot, that image of him just pointing to his head like, yep, I'm crazy, and then he dives off right on top of Triple H. So not only is this guy who had to retire because of a back injury back, but he's performing bumps, high-level bumps, table bumps, top rope bumps, landing on the outside of the ring. And then finally he's able to double hook Triple H's legs and roll through and then pin him for the 1-2-3. Getting the victory and revenge on his friend. And then since it was supposed to only be like a one-time deal, they do the spot at the end of the match where Triple H nails him in the back with a sledgehammer, putting him in a wheelchair or on the shelf or whatever it was, and then he'd be out for a couple of more months before he'd get out of the wheelchair and challenge for the World Heavyweight title at Survivor Series, I believe, in the Elimination Chamber and win it. So this match sparked the comeback of Shawn Michaels, and when he got in there, granted that he's working with Triple H, one of his friends, a guy that's going to do everything he can for him to help him out and make him look good, he didn't need it. Shawn Michaels could have been in there with a couch, and the match would have been awesome. You truly knew how good Shawn Michaels was when he returned. Maybe even in Shawn Michaels' head, he didn't know how good he was going to be, because when you hear back to stories around this time, Shawn was not supposed to come back full time. So, when he did, and he had that long run, he worked another, 10 years, 8 years, something like that, and put on some of the best matches in WWE and WrestleMania and SummerSlam history in his second coming of his career. And what he did in that second half of his career compared to his first half, it was like it was two completely different people. So this match I had to put on my top 10 because I'm such a big Shawn Michaels fan. I was always sad when he left, and when he returned, I felt like I got one of my favorites back. And then on top of that, he performed at such an amazing level, and he impressed the hell out of me. And most likely, he impressed the hell out of everybody at home and watching in the arena that night. So we got our HBK back, and I couldn't have been happier. So excellent job, Triple H and Shawn Michaels. There was no way in the world I could have left this match off of my countdown because I believe it was that damn good. Yet another Intercontinental title match makes the list, and this one comes from Wembley Stadium in the UK. 80,000 people for SummerSlam 1992. Bret Hart versus the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith in the main event for the WWE Intercontinental title. And I have to put this match on this list because of the sheer enormity of it and the fact that there were so many firsts. Back in 1992, you didn't see a whole lot of babyface matches. You might see one or two, but you definitely wouldn't see one in this high profile of a match. Much less the main event. I mean, you'd have to go back to WrestleMania 6 to find something like that. But not only did this match have one babyface match, it had two, because earlier on in the card, you had the Warrior and Macho Man working for the WWE title in a babyface match. So the fact that they were able to put this match in the main event, Bret Hart has told the story in books and in interviews countless times, how he actually went to WWE management, Vince McMahon, and says, hey, if you put me and Davey in the main event and you let us go on last, we will not disappoint you, and we'll put on one of the best SummerSlam matches in history. And I'll be damned if they did it. And I love this rivalry because you guys all know I'm a huge Hart family fan, and I had been watching Davey Boy and Bret work all the way back to their tag team days. And the Hart Foundation defeated the British Bulldogs for the tag team titles back in 1987. So I always thought that this was a small bit of revenge for Davey, that he was actually able to win a belt from Bret for once. And they would even go on years later to face off for the WWE World title. And that would have been really cool if that belt would have changed hands between the two of them, and they would have exchanged the tag, Intercontinental, and World Heavyweight titles in their careers and feuds together. I think that would have been really awesome. But this match was a babyface match. The family was torn. Of course, Davey's married to Diana, Bret Hart's sister. She didn't know who to root for in this thing. Davey Boy was in front of his home country, and those UK fans appreciated Bret Hart as well, but Davey Boy was clearly the babyface in this. The support for him was a lot bigger than Bret Hart's, but you could definitely hear some Bret Hart fans as well, and it was just a really good overall match. Bret's told stories about Davey Boy not really being with it. He would be released from WWE or fired or let go like a month later for steroids or whatever, but he was also on a lot of drugs. I think him and Jim Neidhart were down smoking crack in Florida like a week before this match was supposed to take place. He was not nearly as prepared as Bret Hart. And when you watch this match, you can see how Bret Hart really carried this thing. And the fact that the loser of this match made this match so good is what sticks out in my mind. But you knew that Davey Boy was probably going to win this belt. How could you not? I mean, you're in the UK. It's the first ever big, giant pay-per-view that the WWE has ever held over there, challenging for the Intercontinental title, and him and Bret Hart put on a pretty hell of a fucking good match. A lot of good spots, a lot of good technical wrestling, people diving over the top rope, power moves, suplexes, you name it, you got it in this match, and it eventually saw Davey Boy Smith countering a sunset flip by Bret Hart, leaning forward and pinning him for the 1-2-3 in one of the biggest crowd reactions I can ever remember seeing. When that 3 count hit and you saw the fans jump out of their seats, and then they did the big wide shot of the whole crowd. I mean, you had 90,000 people there, 80,000 people, whatever it was, screaming at the top of their lungs. It was such an amazing celebration for Davey Boy Smith, and luckily, since it was a babyface match, Bret Hart was very gracious in defeat and shook his hand and hugged him, and he stood in the ring with Davey and his sister, and the fireworks went off, and it was such an amazing celebration and a great launching for Davey Boy Smith as now a bona fide singles star, because he really not got on the map yet as a singles competitor since he came back to the WWE and split from Dynamite. So, you know, with Davey Boy winning that title, I thought he was going to go on to even bigger and better things. I'm like, wow, this guy could compete for the world title one day, and he eventually would, but not before getting fired and leaving the WWE for 2 years before he came back. But this match and this night that Davey had and the celebration, you know, you can't ask for anything better. That was Davey Boy at his absolute peak of popularity. You're from the UK, you go back home, you wrestle in the main event against Bret Hart, and you win a championship. I mean, that's every kid's dream right there. So this match easily made the countdown. I almost put this match at number 2, but I've reserved number 2 for a very special match that I think all of you are really going to like hearing about. And that, of course, is Brock Lesnar versus John Cena, SummerSlam 2014. Finally, I'm giving you guys a modern era match. If you've been watching this top 10, I have not mentioned too many SummerSlams in recent history because the years of 2004 through present day, while SummerSlam had a few moments, there's no matches in those pay-per-views that really stick out as one of my favorites of all time, except for this one. And it might surprise a lot of you, because over the years I've been unjustly labeled as a Cena lover, where really I just kind of defend John Cena against the more ignorant of the wrestling fans, which is all I really ever did. But this match, trust me, made me just as happy as any of the biggest John Cena haters out there, because we've never seen it. And it's one of my favorite matches because I was not expecting to see this. I was 1,000,000% expecting Brock Lesnar to win the WWE title. I had been saying that months before in my commentaries when Daniel Bryan had to forfeit the title and they gave it to Cena and the fans lost their minds. I was telling everybody to relax, because if you just stick with the story, John Cena's going to get fucking raped at SummerSlam and he's going to lose that belt to Brock Lesnar. And a lot of the fans were like, no way, he's going to beat Brock again and all this shit. I'm like, no, he's not. They're not going to have Brock Lesnar beat the streak at WrestleMania 30 just to turn around and lose to fucking Cena. It's not going to happen. So I definitely expected Brock to win the title, and I knew that he would. What I was not expecting was for him to kill John Cena and completely brutalize him for the whole match. It's the most lopsided main event in WWE pay-per-view history. We have never seen a WWE title match in a main event of any show to be that one-sided. This was essentially a jobber match. John Cena had a couple of good moments there. I think he even locked Brock in the STF or whatever, but eventually there was just no stopping Brock Lesnar. He basically didn't even break a sweat. He just suplexed Cena from one end of that ring to the other, finally hitting him with the F5 and pinning him with ease in completely dominant fashion. It's almost as if with John Cena getting his ass kicked that I was the winner in this, because all the fans were expecting John Cena to bury Brock Lesnar because he buries everybody, right? And I was the one that was speaking up and saying, God, is your John Cena hate that crazy that has completely blinded you from reality and that you cannot see the writing on the wall here, and that John Cena is simply a placeholder for this WWE title? If Daniel Bryan wouldn't have gotten hurt, they probably would have done the same storyline with Daniel Bryan, where he held the belt, the Authority can't get the title off of him, they get frustrated, and finally they are approached by Paul Heyman that says, hey, if you want to get that belt off of Daniel Bryan, I've got the perfect guy for you. And they essentially did the same thing with John Cena. When he won the title at the Money in the Bank, Stephanie and Triple H appeared pissed off, and they didn't like it, and that's when Paul Heyman approached them and says, hey, if you want to go with a sure thing, why don't you give me a call and maybe we can work out a deal? So I think regardless of what was going to happen, Brock was going to win that belt at SummerSlam. That was obvious. If he wasn't beating John Cena, he was going to be beating Daniel Bryan. But what I was not expecting was for him to go out there and completely and totally and utterly dominate John Cena from bell to bell. And even the pre-match interviews leading up to this, I remember Brock being interviewed and he was talking about his loss to John Cena when he first came back in 2012 at Extreme Rules, and he said, I don't know what the fuck happened at Extreme Rules. I don't even know how that happened. I don't know how this fucking guy was able to beat me. He stands no chance at SummerSlam. Brock went in there supremely competent as the favorite, and John Cena was pretty much shitting his pants despite the fact that Cena had beat him a couple of years before. So you knew Brock's receipt was long overdue, and he went out there and kicked the shit out of John Cena and won the WWE World Heavyweight title in pretty damn close to my favorite SummerSlam match of all time, because I was so happy that the WWE did that. I was so happy that the WWE wasn't afraid to destroy John Cena, knowing that he can bounce back from it. He would eventually get his act together, but not really before taking a step down. I mean, he hasn't seen the world title since that night, and he had the nice run with the US belt, and he's done some other things, but really, that's the last time we've really seen John Cena in a main event of a pay-per-view like that. So when you look at where John Cena is now, and I'm not saying he's not going to win another world title again, now that there's about to be 2 world titles, I think it's inevitable that he will eventually win and tie or break Ric Flair's record or whatever they wanted to do with him. I'm sure he will still do that, but as far as being the focal point of the show, WWE putting all of their eggs in the John Cena basket, you don't see that anymore. John Cena's on SmackDown. He's not even on Raw every week. He's not dominating our television sets anymore, and he's not smeared all over our faces. He's just in a feud like everybody else. Yes, he might win, but he's not being blindly put over, and he's not having ridiculous matches like beating the entire Nexus after being pile-drived on the concrete floor or anything like that. They're booking John Cena today, in present day, a little bit more like a regular fucking wrestler. And this match against Brock Lesnar kind of started all of that, and that's when Brock went out there and took what was his and showed that he is much better than John Cena, much more dominant, much more scary, and much more believable. And the fact that the WWE, in their second biggest pay-per-view of the year, essentially had a squash match in their main event, I had to put this match on my countdown, and I had to put it really high up on my countdown because of how rare something like that was. And I watched this live. I probably live tweeted with all of you. If you guys want to scroll through my Twitter feed 2 years ago and see what I was saying about it, I'm sure that I was echoing a lot of what I'm saying now. And it was nice to see a guy that, even though I defend, I can still be just as annoyed with as a lot of the other wrestling fans were. I understand that he's pushed all the time and he always wins, and his promo work can be boring and lame, and he's just not that edgy of a character. Like The Rock said, he's a big box of Fruity Pebbles. I get all of that. I always have. And that's part of the reason why I was so happy to see Brock destroy John Cena at SummerSlam. I was just the one voice on the other side of the fence saying, okay, can we not wish this guy dead? I understand that he's not Kurt Angle, he's not Eddie Guerrero, but he's also not Hitler. And with the fans, they're either 100% behind somebody or 100% against him, and there's no middle ground, there's no unbiasedness, there's no seeing two sides of every story with them. It's black or white, where with me, I just try to discuss things and look at things from a little bit more logical of a perspective and not worry so much about my favorites winning and my favorites losing and all that shit. And I think that's where the fans' emotions takes control of them, because they're not thinking with their heads, they're thinking with their hearts. They're thinking about who they like and who they want to see pushed and not pushed, not with why WWE might be doing these things. So whenever I talked positively about John Cena, that's the only thing I was really trying to illustrate. And hopefully with me putting this match as my second favorite SummerSlam match of all time, maybe anybody out there that still thinks that I want to suck John Cena's dick, maybe you'll rethink that after hearing this. Which brings us to number 1, but before we get to that, let's take a look at some of the honorable mentions. If I was to make a top 20 favorite SummerSlam matches of all time, all of these matches would be on this list. They were all in very high consideration for my top 10. I almost put a couple of these matches on there, but at the end of the day, I chose what I chose. And since we were just talking about Brock Lesnar, he's had 2 other SummerSlam matches that almost made this countdown. The first one was just a couple of years ago when he took on CM Punk in 2013. I just went back and watched that match a few days ago, and it was just as good as I remember. I loved that match. I loved how close CM Punk came to defeating Brock Lesnar. I wish Brock Lesnar and Dean Ambrose would have had a match this good at WrestleMania. I think they really missed the boat there on doing something epic. But this match was amazing because CM Punk was a huge underdog. There was the tie-in storyline with Paul Heyman there, and Brock is bigger and stronger and tougher than CM Punk, and Punk took it to him. Showed no fear at all and came damn close to defeating the Beast. It was an awesome match. Also, of course, how could I ever forget about Brock Lesnar being launched in 2002 and winning the WWE title? If I would have put this match on the countdown, there would have been 3 matches from that show on my top 10. So I kind of had to bump one of them and I really enjoyed Brock's title win over John Cena more, I think, than his launching. Even though his launching was pretty damn awesome as well. He had only been in the WWE for a few months, and he defeats The Rock of all people, in the main event completely clean, and wins the undisputed WWE title. And that was the beginning of what Brock Lesnar has become. So this one might be a little bit of a sting to not put it on the top 10 because it was so epic, but it's going to have to go in my honorable mentions. Also, I think I mentioned this match earlier on when I was talking about the Demolition and Hart Foundation, but that was the Steel Cage match, title match between Ravishing Rick Rude and the Ultimate Warrior from 1990. Another match that I have a ton of memories of, and the Ultimate Warrior has never really been my favorite in-ring competitor, but he's had a few gems out there. This match with Rick Rude was awesome, the one he had with Hogan at WrestleMania 6 was awesome, and it's a match I remember fondly. I even enjoyed the Warriors match with Honky Tonk Man that went like 25 seconds at the first ever SummerSlam in 1988. But this cage match with Rick Rude was so unbelievably awesome because Rude had him beat. Rude climbed up to the top of the cage, as you see the picture here. He did this shit twice when the Warrior was completely out cold in the middle of the ring and had a chance to win the WWE title but was unable to pull it off. And just a couple of months later, he would head over to WCW after being let go, I believe, by the WWE, and he'd win the world title over there. But going back and watching this match, seeing the Ultimate Warrior bleed for, I think, the first time ever in his career, I don't think the Warrior has ever bled before this or after this. So it was just a few things that we never really saw from the Ultimate Warrior, and he performed really well in a cage match. Had never been in one before and ended up defeating Ravishing Rick Rude, and he was very intense, and he was shaking the cage, and then the end of the show when he's celebrating with the title, standing on top of the cage, holding the belt up, it was just an awesome moment, and I really almost put this match on the countdown as well. A lot of you were probably shocked not to see the ladder match from 1995 on this countdown, but it is an honorable mention. I thought about it, but as good as that match was, I mentioned how they had all the restrictions put on them, and they couldn't even use the ladder as a weapon, and they still went out there and had Match of the Year, so Shawn and Razor deserve a ton of credit for that. However, when I go back and watch their match at WrestleMania 10, that ladder match, to me, nothing can top that, and even though this one at SummerSlam 1995 was very good, I think the one at WrestleMania 10 was better, and when I think about all my favorite SummerSlam matches of all time and the ones that I find myself going back and watching the most, I rarely actually ever watch this match, so it didn't make my top 10, but there's no way I cannot at least mention it, because it was Match of the Year that year, and Scott and Shawn did an amazing job. Another relatively recent SummerSlam, although not that much, back in 2004, Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero had an awesome WrestleMania rematch, which I really enjoyed. And it was actually between this match and Kurt and Rey Mysterio as to who got that number 8 spot on my countdown. So I almost put this match on here, but ultimately decided not to, but it was still an awesome match. Kurt and Eddie worked so awesome together, and they had a great feud and rivalry in 2004. A couple of oddball honorable mentions as well. Number one was 1999, when Test took on Shane McMahon during the whole Test and Stephanie angle, and Shane McMahon wanted to break up the relationship, and then they had a match. I think Stephanie was on the line or whatever, but bottom line was it turned out to be a 10 times better match than we thought it would be. Shane had only worked like 1 or 2 times. He worked with X-Pac a few months before at WrestleMania 15, and then went into this match with Test and kind of like an anything goes match, and it was fucking great. These guys tore the house down, and it was a great finish with Test winning and hugging Stephanie and the crowd popping. Just a great overall moment, and I remember it well. So this is definitely an honorable mention. And finally, in one of the more funny moments on SummerSlam was the jailhouse match between Big Boss Man and the Mountie in 1991. What I liked the most about this match was not necessarily the match, but it was all the extracurricular activities after the match, because the stipulation was the loser of the match had to spend the night in jail, and they were going to film you being taken to the station, being booked and fingerprinted and the whole deal, and the Mountie was going out of his mind. Jacques Rougeau was hilarious. Go back and watch that if you've never seen it. He is fighting this thing tooth and nail. They literally have to drag him to the jail, kicking and screaming. And then the final scene where, you know, the inmate comes up to him and says, "Don't you just love the way leather feels against your body?" And Jacques starts going nuts. It's hilarious. So I had to put this match up there because I always remember going back and watching it, and I laugh every single time. Number 1, not a huge surprise, I'm sure, to many of you, because Bret Hart has been a very prominent figure in this top 10, but I will never forget the match he had with Mr. Perfect at SummerSlam 1991. It's one of my favorite matches to go back and watch. When I was younger, back in the day, and I was watching wrestling and collecting tapes, back in 1991, 25 years ago, I didn't have the massive video library like I have today. I probably had 15 tapes in my collection, so when I found a match I liked, I would go back and watch it over and over and over, and I literally have this match memorized. I could go in a ring and perform this match with somebody else. Granted, I wouldn't do it nearly as well as Bret and Kurt, but I definitely know all the spots and where they go. I also know the commentary by heart. I have watched this match so many times that I know everything about it, and I love everything about it. When I think back to these days, I didn't know that Kurt Hennig was injured, and that's another big backstory to this match, as he went into this match with a bad back that needed surgery, and he was going to be leaving and taking time off. But back then, there's no website, there's no Twitter, there's barely even dirt sheets. We didn't know this going in. So to me, I was surprised when Bret Hart got the title shot. He had just lost the tag team titles with Jim Neidhart a couple of months before. They were going to split the Hart Foundation up and have them go singles again, but when they did this a couple of years before, neither one of them got past the mid-card level. So I really wasn't sure if Bret Hart stood a chance against Mr. Perfect. I had no idea that they were going to take the belt off of Perfect and let him go home and deal with his back, and that they were going to launch Bret Hart into a new single star. I did not see this coming. So even with Stu and Helen in the audience, I still did not put that together, that they were actually going to have Bret Hart win. And I watched this match live on pay-per-view, and I loved every second of it, and it was so beautiful. You watch how well these two guys work together, despite the fact that Kurt Hennig is seriously injured. They would have another match a couple of years later that I liked just as much, if not better. Their King of the Ring 1993 match, and not only one of my favorite pay-per-views of all time, but one of my favorite pay-per-view matches of all time. They did an amazing job, but this was the match that started it all. This is the match that got Bret Hart on the map, and he had spent a lot of time during his first singles run putting over Kurt Hennig when he first came into the WWE as Mr. Perfect. So now it was payback time. When he was able to grab Kurt Hennig's leg and counter a move and turn it into the sharpshooter and lean back, I mean, the referee too rang the bell immediately. Kurt Hennig didn't even have a chance to give up, because they knew once they put him in the sharpshooter they needed to end it quick, because that's a painful move and he's got a bad back. They called for the bell right away, so if that would have been prolonged a little bit longer, that's probably the only flaw in this match. But when the referee called for the bell, the fucking place exploded, and Bret Hart got to celebrate in Madison Square Garden, winning his first ever singles title. I will never, ever, ever forget this match. It's a shame that Bobby the Brain Heenan wasn't able to be in Mr. Perfect's corner. He had kind of gotten away from managing just a couple of months before this, and handed Mr. Perfect off to the coach. And Bobby was even at ringside with Gorilla Monsoon and Roddy Piper doing commentary for this thing, and I'll never forget the feud and the arguments between Roddy Piper and Bobby Heenan. They spent the majority of this match just giving each other shit. Bobby Heenan was just really giving it to Roddy Piper, joking about his parents running away from home and all this stuff, cutting countless jokes on Roddy Piper. Pretty ballsy for Bobby Heenan, who's always been a chicken shit heel manager, to provoke Roddy Piper like this. I can't believe Piper just didn't knock the shit out of him during the match, but it was fun to where it wasn't too much to where they were taking away from the match. They were kind of doing their own thing a little bit with each other, but Gorilla Monsoon kept it all together, calling the match and keeping everybody on the same page. But just the overall match, the commentary, everything about it is why it's my favorite SummerSlam match of all time. I have completely worn out the tape that I originally recorded this match on. I would go back and watch this so many times that the tape quality actually started to decline. And WWE would release Coliseum videos, a couple of which had this match on it. At one point, I had 3 or 4 tapes that had a copy of this match on it. I was so into it. So to this day, it still holds up as my favorite SummerSlam match of all time. If you want to go back and watch a good in-ring wrestling match, from bell to bell, start to finish, this is the one I would recommend. It told a great story. These guys, they show what pros they are, especially Bret Hart, with how technically sound he is, and I can't give enough credit to Kurt Hennig for going out there, not only performing in a match with Bret Hart injured, but performing well. And the match that I consider my favorite in SummerSlam history had a participant in it that was only probably about 50%, and it was still that damn good. So these two guys deserve a ton of credit. I will be forever grateful to Kurt Hennig for helping make my favorite wrestler of all time become the star that he became. And Kurt went above and beyond, too. I mean, even after the match, after Bret beat him, he tore his tights off. He basically completely stripped Kurt Hennig buck naked in the ring, and celebrated not only with the Intercontinental title on his shoulder, but also Kurt's ring gear. It was pretty amazing. The post-match interview was pretty damn hilarious as well. Bret went up into the stands to celebrate with his parents who were there. I think Bruce might have been there, another brother, possibly even a sister, but Stu and Helen were in the audience. The announcers were alluding to that throughout the match. They were showing camera shots of Stu and Helen watching the match, and Bret's hugging him and celebrating with him, and Lord Alfred Hayes, bless his heart, he's up there trying to get an interview with Stu Hart, and we all know Stu. Sometimes he has trouble speaking. And I remember when Alfred asks him a question and Stu starts to talk, and Alfred completely cuts him off and pulls the mic away and says, well, there you have it, and goes on to the next thing. It's really funny if you go back and watch that. And without this match, you never know what would have happened to Bret Hart. If Bret wouldn't have gotten this opportunity, or if the match wouldn't have gone as well, I'm sure Bret still would have done very well. But this match really put him on the map as a singles competitor that can go, and it would be 1 year later, just a year and a month later, he would be winning the WWE title. So not only was I shocked as hell to see Bret win the IC belt, it would only be a year and he would be world champion. So basically 18 months after he's tag team champions with Jim Neidhart, he is the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. And I could not believe how fast Bret reached the top after being in the WWE for so long, and then they just shot him to the moon. And it was awesome. And it sucks today that Bret Hart has turned into this old, bitter guy that literally gives zero fucks. Most recently, he's been giving shit to Seth Rollins, of all people. Seth Rollins, one of the greatest workers we have in our industry right now, talking about how he's too dangerous in the ring and this and that. Bret Hart is not afraid to speak his mind, and I will be honest that I don't agree with a whole lot of what he says. I mean, he really just comes off as somebody that is just bitter about everything, and he just constantly showers everyone with negativity and bitterness, and I really hate it, and I'm really disappointed that Bret Hart says the things that he says sometimes. I admire him on one hand for speaking his mind, especially after all these years, the way he talks shit about Triple H and everybody in the WWE, and he was brought back into the company and seemed to have mended fences with everybody, but when he's outside of the WWE doing interviews, he's still talking shit. So I'm not a huge fan of what Bret has become today, and I really don't agree with much of what he says, but it is entertaining, I'll give him that much. So that is it. I am out of here. I hope you guys enjoyed my top 10. I'm sure there are many matches on here that not everybody is going to agree with, but that's why they are my favorites and not everybody else's. So I will be doing more videos like this in the future. I'll be doing top 10s on various subjects and various pay-per-views and stuff like that, and also there will be one other channel segment debuting in the next couple of months as well. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your support, and I will catch you all in just a few days. Until then, peace.